guarantee 4 more years for Donald Trump.
I'm Chad Groening.
Michael Cohen has been sentenced to 36 months in prison. Cohen faced sentencing after pleading guilty to dodging taxes, lying to Congress, and violating campaign finance laws. Cohen was once President Trump's personal attorney. Time magazine has announced its Person of the Year for 2018. It's the collective of journalists around the world fighting for the truth despite persecution.
Although it's picked out 4 reporters in one newspaper specifically, Time had in mind all journalists looking for the truth despite imprisonment or even death. But it's hard not to read between the lines and see the awards as a thumb in the eye of President Trump, given the sparring he's done with some media outlets. A quick look at Time's video that commemorates this year's winners makes that clear.
The Philippines is a cautionary tale for the United States.
Duterte is
He's an authoritarian leader accused of a variety of human rights abuses.
Matt Philbin of Media Research Center says even the award for truth in journalism has its share of fake news.
I do think that this is a stick to beat Trump. I think if you watch the video, at one point they explicitly use a soundbite of him calling the press the enemy of the people. It comes right before they show the people from the Capital Gazette.
The news doesn't tell the truth.
They are so dishonest.
You are attacking our news. Not you. You are fake news.
Explosive devices discovered in multiple locations.
I hate being the story. Just do.
There's been a shooting at a newspaper building in Annapolis, Maryland.
Which is pretty dishonest because that guy had absolutely nothing to do with Trump. In a year when we've seen so much bad journalism, so much bad fake journalism, to turn around and award yourself this is kind of disgusting.
I'm Steve Jordahl.
In final news this hour, we could be in store for another positive finish on Wall Street. Stocks rallied in morning trading, reversing some of the recent big losses. Technology companies were climbing and energy companies were rising along with crude oil prices. Healthcare and industrial companies also jumped, while safer high-dividend stocks like utilities and household goods makers were little changed. We'll have the final numbers later today. In the meantime, you can find more news at onenewsnow.com.
Holy Spirit speaks to everybody. The problem is most folks don't listen.
Lonnie Poindexter.
If they do listen, they don't take it to heart or they get fearful or whatever. But when you listen and act upon it, wonderful things happen. And because a man of God heard the voice of God and acted upon it, it blesses me today. And you as well for listening in.
Lion Chasers. Weekday mornings at 10 Central on Urban Family Talk. She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
The American people have for a long time been frustrated with Washington, frustrated that too many elected officials don't follow through on their promises, and they want us to do what we said we would do.
Can I tell you something?
Yeah, you just said
without a wall, these are only areas where you have the walls.
We want to do
where
this.
you have walls, Chuck, it's effective. Where you don't have walls, it is not effective.
Sure, unfortunately, that the president choose to shut down the government, that we have a Trump shutdown as a Christmas present.
Now, I personally hope we don't have a shutdown, but I think the president is absolutely right to say the American people want the border secured. It's the right thing to do.
Because of the fact that he said, I'm willing to shoulder it, he's putting it squarely on them to say, I'm not joking, I'm not going to blink, and this is what you're dealing with. And I actually think it's going to work well for him.
And now, Stacey Washington.
Welcome to the program. Thank you so much for being here. Guess what? We have another day, hot, full of news and information and excitement, because more headbands, more Christmas, more celebration of the birth of Jesus Christ, which is the most consequential event to have ever happened. And that is what is so exciting about this season, that we get to wear lots of red and green and spend lots of time with friends, laughing and talking and really enjoying each other's company, which I'm so grateful for this time of year. It's a great time for starting a fire in the fireplace, drinking hot cocoa or coffee or cider, spending time with people, opening presents, giving presents, receiving presents, purchasing presents, all the while keeping a song of glad tidings in our heart about the reason for the season, which is Jesus Christ. I want to encourage you, head over to AFA.net to order your new AFA Christmas wristbands. These are wristbands that are conversation starters. You get a pack of 10. If you buy 2 packs, you get a discount on the whole order, so it's fantastic. You can find out more at AFA.net. You can also find news, information, articles. You can go to onenewsnow.com for breaking news, not just rip from the headlines, not just rip and read from the Associated Press, but real investigative reporting and journalism from the news directors and reporters who work for American Family News over there at onenewsnow.com. And then, of course, head over to StacyOnTheRight.com and hit the subscribe button. And find us on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. It's all Stacy on the Right. And so today on the show, we're going to be speaking with Cassie Smedile. She is an RNC spokesperson. Yesterday, we had Kayleigh McEnany on. She was fantastic. We'll have Cassie on today. Cassie's going to talk about the staff shakeups. Is this something to be concerned about? Is this something to be alarmed about? I think we have a lot of people in both camps, some people who feel like, somebody put out the fire, and other people are like, it's routine for people to transition in and transition out. We'll see exactly what Cassie thinks about that this hour. We are also going to be talking about this big story. So I'm going to come clean. I was kind of on the fence about whether or not to wade into this thing with Kevin Hart and his previous tweets. But there's a lot for us to learn from his reaction to the whole mess, and for us to kind of watch the left eat their own, because Kevin Hart is a dyed-in-the-wool liberal, someone who, I don't know that he really hates Donald Trump specifically on his own, but he has assumed the mantle of hatred for Donald Trump in order to facilitate public speaking engagements, et cetera, et cetera. And as we've said before, it's never enough. So we'll delve into that as well. I have some audio from him where I was kind of struck by the common sense nature of what he said. Not that, like, we know there are people in Hollywood who have common sense. And we know that there are people who work in the public eye in entertainment who are much more like common people like ourselves. They're just really, they're down to earth people. They just work in Hollywood. And so I've heard him speak before. I've heard some of his comedy. And I was surprised to hear him break this subject down in the way that he did. And then I was also pleasantly surprised to see Nick Cannon, who he's an icon for young people, for him to come out with kind of a reaction that was, again, very common sense. So we'll delve into that and we'll take your calls about it. I am dying to hear what you have to say about Nick Cannon coming to the defense of Kevin Hart, pointing out the hypocrisy of the Academy, and even more so, what do you think about this idea that one apology isn't enough? That it's almost like you can never do enough to amend or atone for the sin of not thinking correctly, politically correctly, about homosexuality. Even using the term homosexuality can be something that is very rough and, unable for people to deal with. Like they don't want to deal with that term anymore. So we'll talk about that. You can call in at 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037. We'll be taking calls for the whole show to kind of take your temperature on what you think about this story. It is, in my opinion, it's kind of a big deal because he refused to apologize again. He's not going to keep bowing down. So we'll get to that. Right now, I want to do the daily confession. Joshua 1:9, the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. The Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Now, this can be kind of controversial because in today's secular world, just the idea that you pray to God and expect to hear back, that you expect your prayers to be answered, that thoughts and prayers are one thing, but actually praying to a living God who is really interested in your well-being and has laid out a number of instances where he says, I'm here waiting for your cry. I'm here waiting for you to say, you know what, God, please be in this mix. Please order my steps. Please tell me what to do. Elsewhere in the word, God tells us that we have not because we ask not. And then even elsewhere, he says, and this is in Ephesians 3:20 through 21, now to him who is able to do far abundantly more, greater than all that we dare ask or think, according to the power that works in us. To him be glory in the church and through Christ, and in Christ Jesus throughout all generations, forever and ever. So connect the dots here. He's waiting for our cry. He can do greater, far above, over and beyond anything we dare ask or think, according to the power that works in us, the Holy Spirit. And we have not because we ask not. So what is that thing that I'm struggling with? I'm putting myself here because when we do these daily confessions, I never want anyone who's listening to think I'm raining down something towards listeners. I'm not. I'm sharing what I feel God has laid on my heart to share that is absolutely relevant, because we have a God who is interested in, he's here to rescue us. He's our shield and buckler. He is the Alpha and Omega, beginning and end, creator. All of the things that we look to for in the secular world, people look to movies and superhero characters and government, you name it. They're looking to their diet or their exercise routine or a doctor or anybody that they think can answer the thing that they want taken care of. And there's nothing wrong with going to doctors and getting diagnosis and treatments, et cetera, et cetera. This isn't about one thing being wrong. It's about the source. Do we know who the source is? And are we willing to not only acknowledge that source, Almighty God, but then yield to him in everything so that we can be fully obedient, study to show ourselves approved, and then start walking in that. It's the blessing zone. And this is not the prosperity gospel. This is not speak this into being, speak that. No, it's not that at all. It's when you seek first the kingdom of God, all other things will be added to you. But it's not going to be that you're desperately seeking, 4,000 more square feet or 2 new cars or a boat, or that the new car that you want is a $220,000 Lamborghini. Reference to a story, ChristianDailyReporter.com, if you want to check that out. I'm not going to go into it on the show. This is about walking hand in hand with the Savior, daily sanctification, having him change us so our heart's desire is his desire that he's given to us, that it reflects that kingdom attitude. And then we're able to move and breathe in him and to receive all that he has for us. So we have not because we ask not. So what is that problem that I'm dealing with, the thing that I'm going through, the thing that seems insurmountable to me? And I do have a couple of those that I'm frustrated. I'm not getting anywhere on a couple of these things. And I do consider myself to be someone who prays, and I believe that God answers my prayers. But in these 2 areas, I am not seeing the answer. So I don't blame God for that. I do not, there's no anger associated with it. There's just me knowing that I haven't gone far enough, deep enough. I have not learned enough. I haven't grown enough. There's something more that needs to be done by me in seeking and asking and knocking to my Heavenly Father on these 2 issues. And so I'm going to continue to do that. But I have to first, before I come to him, I must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. It doesn't say he's a rewarder of people who believe sometimes and other times don't, people who sometimes pray, sometimes don't, people who occasionally attend church. I can't earn his favor. I can't earn answered prayer, but I can be obedient to what his word says, and I can study to show myself approved, and I can offer myself as a living sacrifice to him. And then knowing that that facilitates the belief that is required before my prayers can be answered. And so I have to believe that he's a rewarder of those that diligently seek him, and that he answers all prayer. And anywhere where there's double-mindedness or unbelief, that is where there will be unanswered prayer. And there will be frustration and all the things that come with that, but not because God is wrong. The wrongness exists down here with me. And so I felt like sharing this today, because we all have these areas where we're battling. It's like a war zone. You're trying to figure out, either you want out of the situation, or sometimes you want in, sometimes you want the answer because the uncomfortable nature of where you are is just wearing you down. It's like the thing that sharpens your knife. It's your knife sharpener, and it's a tool, but if you don't use it correctly, it can completely destroy the knife. and you feel like you're in that grinder and you're being worn down and you just can't get out. And the answer is Jesus Christ. The answer is more prayer. The answer is to confess God's word back to him and to focus and focus and focus more on pleasing him, giving away more of what it is that I want, putting down my wants and picking up what God has for me. So I want to talk just for a second here about the attributes of God, because often when we're walking in the area where we're not receiving the answer to prayer that we're looking for, when God's not checking our prayer journal and saying, oh, here we go. Let's get some angels on this, this, and this. Let's make this happen for her. Let's move that. Let's move this. Let's move that person. Let's shut that person up. Let's do this, this, and this, because she's got a list of demands here. When we feel like God's not answering our demands, answering our prayers, moving in the way that we want him to move, then we get frustrated. We start to kind of blame him. But is there space for us to be doing that? I think not. There's no space for us to do that, because we're talking about God here. We want him to answer our prayers, but who are we praying to? So I'm going to give you a few of these attributes, and for the remainder of this week, we'll have more of these attributes, because we have to focus on who he is, and we have to worship him and praise him and throw down our desires and our wants and our needs and pick up his desires. And it's an A to Z list of the attributes of God. I love this list. A good, strong Christian woman gave me this list, and I was like, ooh, I love this. This is good for the show. Alpha and Omega. Revelation 22:13 says, I am the Alpha and the Omega, first and the last, the beginning and the end. Ancient of Days. Daniel 7:9 says, as I looked, thrones were set in place, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was as white as snow. The hair of his head was white like wool. His throne was flaming with fire, and its wheels were all ablaze. Comforter. The Holy Spirit is our comforter. Jesus said, and I will pray to the Father, and he will give you another comforter, that he may abide with you forever. That's John 14:16. Creator. Have you not heard that the everlasting God, the Lord, the creator of the ends of the earth, faints not, nor is weary? That's Isaiah 40:28. God is eternal. Before the mountains were born, or you gave birth to the earth and the world, even from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. Psalm 90, verse 2. We'll come back with more on this tomorrow during our daily confession. More of him, less of me. More obedience, more chasing after him and his word and his will. And I'm going to see the answer. Be encouraged. We'll be back with more right after these messages. Keep it here.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. 2019 is upon us, and we're going to be going back to Washington, D.C. and to Williamsburg for our spiritual heritage tours. And if you've been wanting to go, maybe this is the year for you. These tours fill up several months in advance, and one of the reasons they do is because we have an actual historian, a professional historian that comes on our tour with us. His name is Stephen McDowell. He's the president of the Providence Foundation, and he knows more about early American history, especially the Christian influence on early American history. He knows more than anybody I know. So, if you want to go with us, you can find out more information at spiritualheritagetours.com. That's in June and September. Pick the month you want to go. Find out more information at spiritualheritagetours.com. That's spiritualheritagetours.com.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with a legacy moment. Once when our youngest son was in college, he called, sharing with me a burden he had for a man with whom he'd been sharing the gospel. Time and again, he'd sought him out and shared the good news with him, and for whatever reason, the man hadn't responded to Christ. I detected in Brendan's voice a little bit of discouragement, so I asked him, "Son, are you down about this?" He admitted he really was. I said, "Son, God cares about him more than you do. You can't make him come to Christ. Only God can do that." Brendan responded, "Yeah, I know. I guess I sort of forgot about that." Then I said, "Son, the only thing you need to do is to be faithful in sharing the gospel. Trust God to work. You may be one link in a long chain of events that God will use one day to finally turn the lights on in this man's heart and mind. I underscored with him the realization that conversion is the work of the Holy Spirit, and only He can produce the change. Now hear the words of Jesus in John chapter 16, verses 7 and 8. Nevertheless, I tell you the truth. It is to your advantage that I go away, for if I do not go away, the Helper will not come to you. But if I go, I will send him to you. And when he comes, he will convict the world concerning sin and righteousness and judgment. Jesus says it is the job of the Holy Spirit to tenderize the hearts of people, to convince them of their sin, to convince them of their lack of righteousness and God's ultimate righteousness. Well, here's what I want you to remember today. Rely on the Holy Spirit as you share the good news. Trust Him and place the results in God's hands.
More information about the ministry of Crawford Loritz can be found online at livingalegacy.org.
This is Stacy on the Right with Stacy Washington on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the program. If you're watching on one of our live streams, share the show, share the show, share the show, and thank you so much for being with us today. It's my pleasure to be with you here on American Family Radio, the largest radio network of Christian talk programming in the country. It's an honor to be here on this network speaking to you, and it's an honor to have our next guest with us. I actually introduced her yesterday when I had Kaylee McEnany on, who is another favorite of ours. But today I actually do have Cassie Smedile, RNC National Spokesperson. Thanks, Cassie, for joining the show.
Hi, I didn't realize you did that, but we're all very happy members of your Stacy on the Right family. So
I thank you for saying that, because
be with you however we can.
I didn't want to. It wasn't my intention, but I just had my days mixed up, and so we booked Kaylee yesterday, and then you're today. So we don't normally have you guys on back to back.
Busy time of year.
I know, and there's so much going on, and so she provided expert analysis on kind of the dust up with President Trump, which I felt was totally appropriate, between he and Schumer and Pelosi, where he ate their lunch, he made them look terrible, and he really showed them up to be rank partisans and not really caring about the American people when it comes to our safety at the southern border. But now we have another kind of, it's a White House Trump administration type of a story, and it has to do with the shakeups with the staff. And I personally have kind of gotten used to this ride. You know, I'm not the kind of person who's shocked by the same old thing, 3 times in a row. Like after I've seen it a couple times, I'm no longer surprised. And the fact is, the president really feels like using people. And then when the relationship is no longer productive, and if he's not seeing the kind of results he wants, he's perfectly fine with moving that person on and bringing in someone who can meet the needs and requirements that he has at that time. But everyone's got their underwear all in a bunch, and they're freaking out because, General Kelly's leaving, and possibly there are some other staff shakeups on the horizon. What is going on here?
Well, I think it's much ado about nothing. As I was telling someone the other day, if you've been running a marathon for 2 years every single day, you'd probably be a little tired too. And that's what this White House is. It's nonstop. I mean, you see it from most of us before we even get up for the day. The president is up tweeting, and then he's talking late at night, and he's just nonstop, and he's walking and chewing gum and running and jumping rope. We can't keep up with him. And so he brings on these really talented people to be a part of his staff. I think what he says is, happy to have you here for as long as this works. And I think the staff come and they serve and they work as hard as they possibly can for the time that they're there. And then at some point they say, okay, I need to go back to regular life. I need a 9 to 5 back. And the president says, no problem, thanks so much. That's new and that's different. This is a White House that even most people in the Washington press corps or even on Capitol Hill still haven't figured out yet, still haven't gotten used to the pace. Washington is a little more used to a snail's pace, and the president is just blowing right by everybody. So I don't really make much of it, and I am confident he's going to get another person in who will do a great job.
So Cassie, we're in the same mental zone here. I love your analogy of it being kind of, it's like a cross-country race mixed in with a marathon, because it's like sometimes they have to speed up and really put in their best leg work, and then they can slow down a little bit. But the point is they never stop running. And it's a 24-hour-a-day job with someone who only needs about 5 hours of sleep a night and doesn't smoke and doesn't drink and is also 71 years old. And his wife is, well, that woman looks like she's in her 30s. And so, he's got all those kids and all the grandkids. I mean, just hordes of adorable grandchildren and a son who's younger than my youngest child, actually. And so when you think about it and you kind of try to encompass what is he like, I've stopped trying to figure out what he's like or how he's doing that. I've stopped trying to figure that out. I'm much more interested in just seeing the results that he's been able to attain. And it has been a phenomenal run for the economy. And he has made some strides on the immigration issue, but he's being blocked. I just, when we talk about staffing, let's compare for a second here. You mentioned that people aren't used to it. In fact, in DC, it's like a snail's pace. In the private sector, there are many executive positions where once a person has been in that role for 2 or 3 years, they instinctively move on to another one to gain some experience in another area because they're on an upward trajectory. Why don't people see the connection between that and these executive type roles at the White House?
Well, because that would be giving this president and his administration way too much credit. We don't do that. That's just out of the question. And I think that really is it. Why can't you say, you know what, it's a really demanding place to work and the pace is really exhausting, and so it's understandable that people would not stay. Very few White House staffers stay for 1 term, let alone 2 terms. That's a very small group of people. Most people give it a year, 2 years, I think would be a little more normal. Mm. And then you add in the pace of this president, all the things you just mentioned, and it's not unreasonable to see that cut in half even. But again, I'm with you on the results. If there's ever a time when you can say, nothing's getting done, no accomplishments, everything's dried up, now we've got turmoil in the White House, but that is so far from the truth. So now this is just palace intrigue and more fodder to fill up the 24-hour cable news channels. It
is, because it's there. So what I'm noticing with the media is people that they hate. So it'll be one of someone who works in the Trump White House or the administration, and they hate them, and they've routinely called for this person to be fired or let go or pushed out. But then when the person says, I think I'm going to go on and do some different things in the private sector, then that person or those news persons then are all up. They're like, I can't believe he's being pushed out. He's being let go. This is another sign of a super, tumultuous White House. I don't know that the Obama administration wasn't as tumultuous. They had plenty of people come in and serve for a year, 18 months, and then leave. Right. They just didn't make as big of a deal out of it. It's not that it didn't happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing you kind of reminded me of it when you were talking there is also that's different for this White House is that the president has brought in folks who many of them made their careers in other industries, whether it's General Kelly in defense. I think of Gary Cohn and a lot of his economic advisors in the business world. So for them to come to the White House, they come and they serve in the capacity that makes sense for as long as it makes sense, and then many of them go back to their other careers or move along. These are not career bureaucrats or career government workers, which is what I think is more typical of previous administrations. So that's a whole new ballgame too. So I mean, we've seen any number of times that the press. In fact, I think General Kelly was supposed to leave by the beginning of summer. So here we are at the end of the year, and now he's finally announced on his own terms that he's leaving. So how many times have they announced this and then they were wrong? It's, again, just fodder to fill up the cable news channels because what else would they talk about?
Cassie, they've said he's leaving so many times that this weekend, a friend of mine who's very, very newsy, she's so up on everything, she texts us and she's like, I think General Kelly's leaving. And the first thing I thought was, again, because he's like leaving every month. And I texted back. I was like, well, I haven't seen anything yet. Are you sure you're looking at a current? You know how it is. You see a link on Facebook, you click through and you don't check the date. And then you realize, oh, I've shared a story from 6 months ago. Oh, no. So I thought maybe it was something like that. But she's so sharp. She was like, no, I thought I saw something this morning. So a few hours go by. It's the weekend. So I'm trying not to be combing the internet for stories. But then, you know what happened, Cassie? I was on my phone and just instinctually, I'm like a robot. I swipe over and then Apple News comes up and it says that he's leaving, that the president mentioned it, that he's leaving at the end of the year. And I thought, oh, so it is real. And then I realized, oh, my girlfriend, she was right. So I text her. I'm like, you were right about that. Well, but again, they were saying that he shouldn't even be there because a general can't make a good chief of staff. And the fact that they brought in this general means that the White House is full of chaos and Trump can't control his own staff. So he's bringing in someone to be a hardline ruler over these people. They're unruly, they're inexperienced, yada, yada, yada. Now he's leaving and they're like, oh no, he's leaving, another loss for the Trump administration. I'm like, can you make up your mind? Did you like him or not? Do you want him to stay or not? You've been saying he's leaving for a while. Why don't you just say, well, we told you he was leaving? They can't even get that part right.
Well, even a broken clock is right twice a day. I think that's kind of how it is. But you're right. Do you love him? Do you not? Oh, how could he possibly do this job? Oh, he brought order to the office. What is it? If you say it all, then at some point you can claim you were right. But it is, at the end of the day, their greater cause is to do everything possible not to give the president credit for anything. So that's the goal, I think, of each day. I really do believe that. As much as I interact with reporters who I think are well-meaning, when it comes to the cable news, you don't know if you're watching a news outlet or if they're getting their sources from the supermarket tabloids. There seems to be a blurred line. As you're talking about this, it sort of reminds me of, is Jennifer Aniston pregnant or getting a divorce? Or, you see it every week.
Remember before when she and Brad Pitt were married, and every week at the grocery store, I'd be waiting there, for my turn, and it would say, Jen and Brad, they're getting divorced. Jen and Brad, pregnant with twins. And I would look at it, and then you go to the next week and you're like, oh, so I still haven't heard anything about her being pregnant, and I still haven't seen any evidence that they've broken up. And then they finally broke up. So I was like, man, it feels like they just drove their relationship into the ground. And then I thought, well, wait a minute. Who pays attention to the newspaper and lets that dictate their relationship? And then he gets married to Angelina Jolie, and it was the same thing. The headlines could have been identical. They just swapped out her name, Aniston's name, for Jolie, and they said the same stuff for them for years and years and years until they finally broke up. So I guess they were like, well, they're going to break up eventually. We'll just call it now and just keep calling it until it happens.
We'll just call it and then take claim.
Yeah.
I know. And it's hard, though, that news organizations or ones that used to be pretty revered now seem to be slipping into the same thing. And why not talk about what's actually going on? And I think that's why you see that ratings are slipping, because, frankly, people watch it and say either I don't care, or B, this doesn't match how I'm feeling in my everyday life and in my community and my business and all that. So is it any better than what you read while you're waiting in line at the grocery store checkout? But at the end of the day, the bottom line really is this is something I'm going to care about if other things come to a halt, if other things stop working, if we stop getting the agenda passed, if we stop getting conversations going, deals done, negotiations reached, then you're going to say, well, what's going on? Do we need to get some other folks in there? But at this point, you're not seeing anything like that. Things are going. And to talk about yesterday's Oval Office meeting, the difference in conversation between people in Washington and people in real America, where you and I are from and where you blessedly get to still live, I mean, night and day. And it's just really something to take a step back and be able to witness the difference. And then that's when you know what's important and who's just trying to get a headline and clicks.
I agree, Cassie. And I think, you've made a very important point that can't be stressed enough, which is that we have so many people who do live in, everyday America where these news stories and these staff shakeups are really inconsequential. You don't change anything in your day based on whether or not the chief of staff is, Grant Bossy or General Kelly. It doesn't matter to Americans which person is the chief of staff. And I think the president having someone in there that the relationship is fresh and new, he seems like he's the kind of person who's on fast forward. You meet people who are kind of slow and steady and you kind of know what to expect with them. And then you meet people who are at a normal pace, like, kind of like regular people. And then you meet overachievers, individuals who, even when you're talking to them, you feel like everything about them and everything around them is moving at a faster pace than normal. And the president seems to be that kind of a person. So he works with people until the relationship is basically, he's done with the relationship, the working relationship. The person has satisfied the thing that they needed to do. The reason they were brought on has been accomplished. And then he moves on. I think it's a great lesson for those of us who maybe are holding on to some stale business relationships or stale, friendships or whatever the issue is. And we're holding on to it, not willing to dive into that new relationship or whatever is supposed to be the next step. It's a great chance for us to kind of look, just take some stock. Is this methodology that he utilizes, could it be of some benefit to me personally to evaluate something that's going on? It might not be, but it might be. Instead of listening to these media talking heads, we could, kind of take a page out of his book and say, hey, it works great for him. Could this be something that I need to evaluate in what I'm doing in business relationships? I mean, I like learning from people and seeing what successful people do and seeing if there's something that I can glean from it.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more, and how you're so right, how applicable to our own work, but also our own lives. I mean, you have some people stick with you through your entire life, and others are with you for certain chapters in your life, and it's not a negative or a positive. It just is what it is, and I think we all can think of those people, and certainly in the administration. I mean, whether it's been in his businesses or even in the administration, there are people who have been with him really since day one. I mean, certainly his family, but I always think of Kellyanne Conway. She is a steady person to him, and I imagine she's going to be around for a long time. Even if she changes capacity, she'll be around him for a long time because that relationship just really works. But when you think about the chiefs of staff, Reince Priebus was wonderful for helping to staff up the White House. Then General Kelly has been great to bring, I hate to keep using order, but organization. Okay, now we've got our priorities. Now let's work through the day-to-day of how that gets figured out. And this next person is going to be instrumental, probably moving him through his reelection, but also as we navigate the new waters with not having the majority in the House, having the divided Congress. So to have somebody who's really astute with that, I mean, that makes sense, I think. And to your point, that's how a lot of businesses operate. And why should our White House, I think some would argue our government might be better off if we operated that way, too, instead of having people who just make careers out of hanging out in the same bureaucratic position.
I couldn't agree more. And with that, I hear the music. We always love it when we have you on. Please tell Kaylee that we say Merry Christmas from over here in the Midwest, and also Merry Christmas to you, and thank you for coming on today.
Absolutely. Merry Christmas. Always great to be with you.
All right. Talk to you again soon. It's Cassie Smedile, RNC National Spokesperson, and one of our favorites from the RNC. We'll be back with more right after this.
Equipped with Chris Brooks.
This program is an apologetic endeavor. What I want to do is really train you in the art and science of defending and commending your Christian faith to people who maybe they've been hurt by the church, maybe they don't believe like you believe, and you're saying to yourself, how do I have an effective conversation with them? Well, we're looking for an evangelistic edge, if you will, that will allow us to more effectively, more contextualize the gospel so that we can reach men and women for Christ. Quite often, the on-ramp, if you will, is looking at culture and taking advantage of the conversations that folks are already having and saying, how can I leverage this to get people to talk about Jesus? This show becomes kind of massively significant to you if your desire is to reach people for Christ.
Get equipped with Chris Brooks.
Join me Monday through Friday at noon Central Time on Urban Family Talk.
American Family Radio.
Samaritan's Purse.
And your family.
Together, we can bring good news and great joy to needy children.
Simply pack an Operation Christmas Child shoebox with toys, school supplies, and hygiene items. Then, drop off your shoebox gift during National Collection Week.
Visit AFR.net, click the Operation Christmas Child banner, and then get packing.
As we all know, Jesus is the reason for the season. But sadly, there are some folks who don't.
Join the American Family Association and spread the word by ordering our Keep Christ in Christmas wristbands. You can purchase them in sets of 10, and if you buy more, you'll save more. Order by December 14th to receive them just in time for Christmas. You can share them with anyone. We just want to remind people that you can't have Christmas without Christ. Order yours now at afastore.net.
Fox on Faith with Lauren Green.
Countless portrayals of Charles Dickens' classic story, A Christmas Carol, have made the miserly Ebenezer Scrooge a cultural icon. Yet there's a lot of faith embedded in the story of Scrooge's redemption than most adaptations present. For instance, the Ghost of Marley and the Three Spirits connect with the four lessons of Advent. The Reverend Cheryl Kincaid.
The first is hope. The second is faith, which is the shepherds and the wise men. The third is Bethlehem. And the fourth is joy. And each of the spirits correlate with each of those lessons.
Kincaid's book, Hearing the Gospel Through Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, delves into its theological meaning, like Scrooge's first name, Ebenezer. It's from the Old Testament. It means God is my help. But it was Tiny Tim's words that helped Kincaid after a car accident rendered her partially paralyzed.
And it touched my heart because he wasn't asking to be healed. He was asking for God to use him where he was at.
For Fox on Faith, Lauren Green, Fox News.
You can watch a live stream of the show on Facebook or YouTube at Stacy on the Right. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
So I just got a call from the Academy, and that call basically said, Kevin, apologize for your tweets of old, or we're going to have to move on and find another host. Talking about the tweets from 2009, 2010. I chose to pass. I passed on the apology. The reason why I passed is because I've addressed this several times. This is not the first time this has come up. I've addressed it. I've spoken on it. I've said where the rights and wrongs were. I've said who I am now versus who I was then. I've done it. I've done it. I'm not going to continue to go back and tap into the days of old when I moved on and I'm in a completely different space in my life. The same energy that went into finding those old tweets could be the same energy put into finding the response to the questions that have been asked years after years after years. We feed in the internet trolls and we reward them. I'm not going to do it, man. I'm going to be me. I'm going to stand my ground. Regardless, Academy, I'm thankful and appreciative of the opportunity. If it goes away, no harm, no foul.
Welcome back to the program. That was Kevin Hart, who he's an actor and a comedian and someone who has really become very successful recently doing family-friendly movies and specifically voiceovers in cartoons, and just he's gone from stand-up comedian to mainstream Hollywood actor. And so, of course, accordingly, because he was offered an opportunity to go and host the Oscars, which they have a ratings problem. They have a problem with a lot of people who are on their programming when they're going up to do the Oscars as the host. These people really spend a lot of time talking about politics, injecting their personal views into issues that have zero to do with the movies that they've been, lauded for, zero to do with the reason why they're on that stage, and Americans are not tuning in to hear their political beliefs. And so it's really interesting that someone took the time to dig through Kevin Hart's previous tweets and some of his comedian work, some of his comedic work, and locate some tweets that were offensive to the LGBT movement. So Kevin Hart has already apologized for the tweets in question and for the jokes in question. And if you're wondering what they were, generally speaking, just to kind of make sure that we do cover that bit, he had a number of things that he was making jokes about. And one of them was that he has a son and he's heterosexual himself, and he would not want his son to be a homosexual. And it was a joke. And when the joke was delivered, many, many, many audiences laughed about it. And I don't think at the time it was considered to be homophobic or at all offensive. He also tweeted these things out, and the tweets were well received. Now remember, these are old tweets. So these are old stand-up routines, not something that he's been discussing recently. Never mind the fact, because I know what you're thinking. I have to say it. We have to be real here. I don't know a parent, and I do know a lot of parents, who would say, you know what I really wish? My chief aim for my child is that they would be a homosexual. Why would you want your child to have to go through the obvious hard path that it entails being homosexual. Even in today's America, where everybody has to bow down to the LGBT agenda, most parents, if they're being honest, if they're no cameras rolling, no cell phones in hand, if it's just a one-on-one conversation and you ask them, they're going to say, no, they don't want that. And for Christians, we know we don't want that because that's outside of what God has for us. That's sin. That's living in unrepentant sin. That is preventing people from getting into the kingdom. Who in their right mind would want their child to be stuck in that situation? Intentionally, as in they wished for that. No good parent would. So the fact that he cracked a joke about it, really honestly, the only reason it's getting any play is because someone didn't like that he was going to host the Oscars. Somebody didn't like it. And so they decided they were going to make a big deal out of it. And instead of him offering yet another apology, he said, oh, I addressed that already. And the Academy was like, well, we need you to address it again. And he was like, not today. Thank you. If you don't want me to do your little thing, I won't do it. You know what? It's not that big of a deal to me. Which also speaks to the level of success that he's garnered. And, you know, he basically is saying this gig isn't big enough for me to be forced to bow down and take a knee to the SJWs, the social justice warriors. But it wasn't done there. He put this statement out on Instagram. It was a video on Instagram, and he encapsulated his entire thought on it in a minute. So the whole video is on Instagram. And then Nick Cannon kind of rode into the rescue because I think, and he pretty much expresses that he feels this is unequal treatment. But he didn't just say, you're not being fair. He went after the Academy with both guns blazing. And I personally think it's a beautiful sight to see, because the Academy doesn't have any room to judge anybody. They were giving awards to Harvey Weinstein. And they knew he was a sexually aggressive predator who preyed on women and set situations up where they would be trapped with him and he would assault them. They knew that. But they just continued to give him awards and continued to let him swan around the Oscars and act like he was a bigwig, when they knew he was a dirty dog, low down, somebody who you couldn't leave your sister or your wife or your girlfriend or any woman that you cared about. You couldn't leave them alone with him. You couldn't even leave them alone with him in a crowded room. That's how aggressive he was. And the Academy just bowed down to him and treated him like a king, and they knew that's who he was. But don't take it from me. Nick Cannon is actually roasting the Academy over their hypocrisy, over their treatment of Hart. And, you know, am I a huge fan of Nick Cannon? Irrelevant. He's speaking the truth here. Am I a huge fan of Kevin Hart? Or do I care? You know, I don't care if he hosts the Oscars. There's no way I'm watching it. But the issue here is that these people want the power to be able to destroy anyone if you're not willing to bow down. That's the power they want. And it is our job to deny them that power. No person should be able to say, your opinion means you need to apologize to me and keep apologizing to me until I tell you to stop. And if you don't, you're losing everything. No other person should be able to do that to an American citizen. It's wrong. So here's Nick Cannon in number 2.
If we're going to bring up the past, then let's bring up the past of the Academy. You know, if we're going to dig things up as I did, and I could have kept on going. But, hey, let's talk about, you know, prior to 2015, I think somewhat of like 6,000 voting Academy members, 100% of them were male and 95% of them were white. But things are changing. We've allowed them to grow. So why can't we allow the people that the Academy employs or empowers to grow? I mean, we talk about the past. Let's talk about Hattie McDaniels, you know, when she was the first African-American woman to win an Academy Award. But she had to sit in the back corner alone after she received her award because of a segregated room and couldn't sit with the rest of her cast mates from Gone with the Wind. Did anybody receive an apology for that?
Now, do you see what he's doing here? He's saying that when the Academy was segregating people off and the only black woman in the room was made to sit at a table by herself, they never came back and apologized. That they haven't apologized for the fact that they don't use a quota system to enforce actual representation in every demographic group in the Academy. They don't say, oh, well, we have too many white men or too many black men, or we don't have enough Asian men in the academy, so we're going to enforce a quota system, and this percentage of the academy has to be this and this and that. In other words, they're not putting the same level of scrutiny in their own backyard that they're putting on some old, inconsequential tweets of Kevin Hart. So they feel like they can mash his face in the dirt and tell him to bow down, but they themselves have not bowed down. They haven't issued any apologies to any demographic groups. And don't get it twisted. I don't care what the makeup of the academy is. I don't care if the academy has apologized for racially segregating people back in the day. Segregation was once legal in this country, and people who participated in it were doing so because they could. The same way that we participate in things here because we can, and it morally repugnant or not, if the law allows it, some people are going to engage in it. So if Kevin Hart needs to apologize again, he's already apologized, why do we not see, let's everybody just apologize, starting with the academy. Before they start talking about the speck in Kevin Hart's eye, they should address the beam in their own eye. Now, it's not just that they're having problems with Kevin Hart no longer being the host. They're also dealing with another issue. And this to me is kind of funny, because apparently they didn't think about what would happen if they told him, bow down, slave, we're social justice warriors, and you are belong to us. Rub the lotion into your skin. They didn't think it through, because he said, no, I don't belong to you. I'm my own person. I'm going to stand my ground. And also, you know what? I'd love to host the Academy Awards, but if it means basically debasing myself and giving up my personal integrity, I'm not going to do it. So thank you so much, but no thanks. So now they don't have anybody to host the thing. So they've made a bunch of announcements, like mini announcements. They're kind of feeling their way around. They're like, hey, you know what? What should we do? Should we do a SNN style type of a thing? If we do SNL, will that help? If we don't do an SNL type of a thing, what will we do? They're literally trying to figure out what to do, because it didn't occur to them that Kevin Hart might say, you know what? Forget it. I'll be at home that evening with my family playing ping pong and eating pizza. They didn't even think. They were just like, I guess that it didn't cross their minds that he might say no. And there was some on E-television or something like that, and they were talking about this story, and the guy was like, well, he should apologize again. And as I was listening to him, I could literally hear the lack of testosterone in this man while he was sitting there typing on his laptop on E-television. It was two guys, and one of them was like, hey, you know what? I don't think he should apologize again. He already apologized. And the other guy was like, well, he should keep apologizing until people, he should at least apologize one more time. A lot of people might not know he didn't apologize. And so they went back and forth like that. And I actually got away from the conversation and listening to the content of it at one point, and I was just taking in the girlishness of this grown man on television behind a laptop saying that another man should apologize repeatedly for something that happened years ago that he already apologized for, because someone out there might not know he apologized. And when they first came across the information, they would be offended. And the only good thing to do would be to apologize again. And I mean, honestly, look around you. These metro men running around with their, they've got those skinny pants on. I know it's the style, whatever. But they're on the inside, there's no man there. There's no there there. There's no man there. You're literally looking to and listening to basically some kind of, it's like a messed up woman trapped inside of the body of a man. And it has no backbone. It has no testosterone. It doesn't know when to say no. It doesn't have the capacity to say no. I don't know what this new thing is. What do you even call it? And so if he was just like some anomaly, then it'd be one thing. But this type of man that doesn't know how to say no and doesn't recognize when another man is taking a stand to defend his own personal liberty and to take responsibility and say, look, I apologized already. You know, Kevin Hart says he's evolved. I don't think he's evolved. I think if you ask him one-on-one with no cameras rolling, Kevin Hart, do you want your son to grow up to be a homosexual? He'll say no, absolutely not. I haven't changed on that. I don't think he's evolved. He just doesn't talk about that kind of stuff in stand-up comedy anymore because it's no longer acceptable. It has become taboo. So it's a business decision. It's not a change in his actual moral stance on whether or not he finds homosexuality acceptable. So a top comedy agent says that the Academy is, quote, freaking out. He was speaking on the condition of anonymity, and I'm over at hotair.com. He says that there were no contingency plans in place by the Academy or their broadcaster, ABC, and now the producers are back at square one. And so then the other thing that has really is a problem is if we're going to hold Kevin Hart to this standard, then that means any comedian who would be asked to take Kevin Hart's place has to have the same kind of scrutiny placed on their public persona, Twitter profile, jokes that they've told, whatever. Which means so many people in Hollywood are immediately, if the Kevin Hart standard is the standard, then everyone's disqualified except Ellen. So they don't want off the cuff. They don't want someone who's so edgy they can't predict what they're going to say. They don't want someone who's going to have the kind of humor that reflects mainstream Americans, which is most of us are perfectly fine laughing at jokes that make fun of everybody. Jokes about black people, women, men, short folks, tall folks, super skinny folks, regular size folks, fat folks. We're fine with it as long as it's funny. As long as it shows some kind of depth of humor. And what they want to do is they want to take the fun out of everything. And Kevin Hart said, no, not today. No, thank you. Good for him. I'm still not his biggest fan, but good for him. All right. OneNewsNow.com news and information up next. If you're saying goodbye, God bless. If not, we'll be back with more.
Family Talk.
Secular progressives in the United States have worked to alter the very nature of our republic.
For the progressives, there are no longer any God-given natural rights.
AFA Executive Vice President Ed Vitagliano helps you understand the progressive threat to the American Republic. Get your copy of this powerful DVD from the AFA Cultural Institute at afastore.net.
Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
For American Family News, I'm Chris Woodward. Former Trump fixer Michael Cohen has been sentenced in New York. Fox's Gernal Scott has more.
Cohen has been sentenced to 3 years in federal prison. Concurrent to that, 2 months for lying to Congress. He'll be on supervised release afterwards for 3 years. The crimes he's being punished for include hush money payments ordered, prosecutors say, by then-candidate Donald Trump. Cohen accepted responsibility for his actions, saying in court he likened working for the president as personal and mental incarceration. Cohen left the court in Manhattan without further comment. Cohen will have to pay up to $2 million in restitution and fines. He plans to voluntarily surrender on March 6th. In New York, Gernal Scott, Fox News.
Rats are overrunning Washington. No, really. The nation's capital is in the midst of a rodent epidemic, and the District of Columbia is routing nearly $1 million in additional money toward anti-rat efforts. Experts blame a string of mild winters and a sharp increase in the number of restaurants, which create more garbage on which rats thrive. An earthquake has been reported in East Tennessee. Here's Fox's Jeff Manasso.
The U.S. Geological Survey says a magnitude 4.4 earthquake struck eastern Tennessee around 4 a.m., centering near Decatur, and was felt in Atlanta with a 3.3 magnitude aftershock. Minutes later, no injuries reported.
There might be some very light damage. Generally, that's going to look maybe like things having fallen off walls or out of cabinets. There might also be some cracking in sidewalks or foundations.
USGS geophysicist Amy Vaughn says the region is an active seismic zone that frequently sees smaller earthquakes. Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
While things are a long way from right for Pastor Tim Bolin and his Paradise, California Alliance Church, they are looking up. AFN's Steve Jordahl continues our coverage.
The entire town of Paradise was scattered to the winds after the campfire ravaged it last month. Pastor Tim Bolin wasn't sure there'd be any pieces to pick up, even though the church and his home were two of the few buildings that were spared the flames. Bolin took inventory thanks to a church in nearby Chico, which is letting them meet every Tuesday night as a displaced congregation.
We're looking at several hundred people that still want to make this church and this community work, and we've been meeting at a church down in the valley, and it has been fantastic.
So a plan is forming that might make Paradise Alliance a beacon of hope among the charred ruins. Bolin says they've been getting help from Christian disaster recovery ministries as well.
Samaritan's Purse actually is going to be on our campus. They're going to be using our campus to house about up to at least 100 volunteers at any given time for the next 3 to 4 months.
Samaritan's Chandler Sailors says volunteers will be helping residents literally sift through the ashes to find items that might have survived, like wedding rings or china.
I have never seen anything like this. Granted, I have never worked a fire response, but, you see things in the news, but it's much different when you're on the ground and you're face-to-face with these homeowners that have suffered so much grief.
Bolin says it's going to take a while to get their building back in shape and in use, but he is looking forward to a special service there for as many of the displaced residents as can come. I'll tell you about that in our next report. I'm Steve Jordahl.
In world news this hour, the British Prime Minister may survive a no-confidence vote today. Theresa May has been in talks with ministers of Parliament, and while I certainly do not condone this type of thing, British bookmakers have apparently suspended bets on whether May keeps her job. Apparently they gamble on that kind of thing. According to the Associated Press, the odds of May staying on as PM have increased since betting began. In final news this hour, China may have agreed to some of the USA's terms as both nations continue talks over trade policy and tariffs. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo told Fox and Friends to stay tuned.
Yeah, I think we're closer. I truly think we're closer, and I'm very hopeful in the next handful of weeks there'll be some good announcements.
China has reportedly agreed to reduce tariffs on U.S. vehicles, but details are still forthcoming. That is American Family News for this hour. For more news and information, visit onenewsnow.com.
Pastor D.
The Back to God movement always reminds people that we got to know who we are and whose we are. And we are children of the Most High God. Made in His image and likeness. That's what Genesis 1:26 says. Made in His image and likeness. So that means if Yeshua could walk on water, guess what? We can too.
Each weekday at 4 o'clock Central on Urban Family Talk. And let's get back to God. She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
The American people have for a long time been frustrated with Washington, frustrated that too many elected officials don't follow through on their promises, and they want us to do what we said we would do.
Can I tell you something?
Yeah, you just said
without a wall, these are only areas where you have the walls.
We want to do
where
this.
you have walls, Chuck, it's effective. Where you don't have walls, it is not effective.
It's sort of unfortunately that the president choose to shut down the government, that we have a Trump shutdown as a Christmas present.
Now, I personally hope we don't have a shutdown, but I think the president is absolutely right to say the American people want the border secured. It's the right thing to do.
Because of the fact that he said, I'm willing to shoulder it, he's putting it squarely on them to say, I'm not joking, I'm not going to blink, and this is what you're dealing with. And I actually think it's going to work well for him.
And now, Stacy Washington.
Hello. Welcome to the program. I am so glad to be with you, and we have so much more to discuss here on the show today. What we're going to get into is Ted Cruz actually says Nancy Pelosi's afraid. And I love his commentary here. And then we're going to talk about the secret recording case, federal judge ruling in favor of James O'Keefe and Project Veritas. And we're going to take your calls all hour. I'm interested in getting your feedback on the Kevin Hart issue and so many other things. So 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037. We have the best listeners in the world here at American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. And we're so excited to have you with us today. Let's go to Katrina in Texas. She's calling about Kevin Hart. Hey, Katrina. Thanks for calling into the show.
Hi, Stacey. How are you? First, I just want to say you're just such a phenomenal woman, and I can see that you are certainly in the spirit in regard to God, our Savior. I just commend you so much. But when you were speaking earlier in regard to Kevin Hart, you spoke on men with, the fitted pants things and, the computer, the laptop thing. I kind of don't want to go into it too much. I'm trying to hurry. But you are so right. It just takes me to the time in the Bible in Kings of Ahab and Jezebel. And Ahab did not have a sign, and the nation was perverted. And I try to tell people so many times and say, you know what? You guys are so blind as to what's going on around here. You're concerned about skin tones and all these things going on, and it's just a veil. The enemy has your eyes veiled. You need to see the times that we're in, the crisis, our crisis returning, and so many men, instead of them standing up. And I'm not saying all Christian men, my husband and I were Christian, but all Christian men are not this way. But many of them just don't have the spine to stand up for what's right. And so all this perversion with all, with the television, the radios, and all these things have crept in. And so they're so eager to attack anyone that's on the right that's trying to stand up for what's truly going on. So I just wanted to say that. You're just a phenomenal woman.
Thank you so much, Katrina. I really humbly accept that, and I pray that God will continue to use me here. And I echo your comments. Thank you for kind of seconding that, because I'm starting to get a little, like, how at first you're annoyed, but you just ignore it. But I'm starting to notice this more and more and more with men with these kind of feminized voices, men who don't seem like they're interested in the true role of men, which is leadership and standing out in front. And I know I've even gotten emails to the effect, well, you're outside of what you should do because you're working on radio and telling people your opinions when you should be at home taking care of your family. I actually work out of my home. I do take care of my family. I cook dinner every night. I'm very, very, very much in the traditional role, and I'm very submitted to my husband. He's the head of our household. I also do this radio show, but it does not interfere with what I can do, and my husband approves of this. He supports this work. But we get outside of that in these conversations about what I'm doing because I'm married to a man, an actual man's man, wherein I'm seeing a lot of men out in the culture who are not, they're just not manly. And I know that for some people, they'll say, well, some men aren't as manly as others. Okay, fine. Not everybody's going to be a man's man, Clint Eastwood type, that archetypal thing that we've seen in Hollywood before. But women desire men to be men, not to be male-ish or to be somewhat more manly than regular women, but for them to be manly, for them to be men. And I just keep seeing this over and over again where it is becoming so, like, first of all, just notice if you go by the playgrounds, how many of the stay-at-home dads are out there. And no offense to you if you're a stay-at-home dad, God bless you. This isn't about you in particular, but the proliferation of men who would prefer to stay home and watch children while their wives go out and earn all the money and put all of the food on the table, that's not godly. That is not godly. So in your circumstance, you're submitted to God, that's what you have going on. I'm not going to come, disregard my opinion. But it's not what I see God calling men to do in the Bible. It's not what I see him calling men to do in our culture. And I care nothing for labels like being a feminist or anything like that. I care about more of us realizing our true God-given potential and the purpose that he has for our lives, and us being able to walk that out imperfectly, because we are people and we're sinful and we need the Savior. So we're never going to be that, oh, you know what, that person's perfect. And I'm just as guilty as anybody else of, someone, crossing me. And then I'm like, well, that's not Christian. The first thing you think is, how could they do that? They're a Christian. Well, they're a human being, and people make mistakes. We all do. We are all going to make mistakes. We have to hold ourselves to as high a standard as possible. The mistakes can't be excused or written off as, well, you know what, we're all human, we're going to make mistakes, and then, don't pay attention to it. Don't strive for better. But I feel like we're way outside of what God has for us culturally, looking at the way we treat men, the way we talk about men, and the way that in response to that, a lot of men in the younger generation of people coming up, the millennials, especially the younger end of the millennials, the men are saying, look, I can't beat them, join them. They don't want that role specifically, but they're filling the role that's left for them because we got all these warrior chicks, all these Wonder Women running around, this is what you have to do. This is who you have to be. Dictating everything. That's not the role that God has for us in the Bible. We're not to be dictating to our men what they're to do and what they're not to do. That is not our role. And I recommend to you Hidden Heart Ministry. Let me get the Hidden Heart Ministry website for you real quick. It's hiddenheartministry.org. And if you go there, you'll find classes, and those are all local, okay? But maybe you want to go to the hiddenheartministry.org website and locate the materials to host a class in your area. And what I would suggest is that if you're married, or if you're single and you're marriage-minded, or if you're single and you just want to know what God's word says about the roles of men and women and how beautifully he's created it for us to complement each other, and that when we get in our right roles, how he can bless that, then order the materials. You can actually take the study and the classes anywhere. They have a video series that goes with it, and you can take it. It's amazing. The Bible says we're destroyed because we have improper knowledge. We don't have knowledge. We're destroyed for a lack of knowledge. It's so true. This is something that it's just so fundamental. I just wish every woman who was graduating from college would take this course to save themselves the heartache of trying to go our own way and then realizing that our own way is horribly flawed and will never work. And finally coming broken to the realization that we need God's way, and then having to put the pieces back together. They actually have a special going right now through November for the new abridged version of the Cry of the Hidden Heart Bible Study, which is a 13-week course that they've condensed into 8 weeks so that you can get through it more quickly. And you can do it one-on-one with another friend, or you can do it as a group. And the group Bible study is so rich and so fulfilling. It can really give you a godly perspective on, first of all, what marriage is, not just for you, but for other people who are married, other women who are married, and also how God can work. Some of the questions that are condensed into this new 8 chapters of the Cry of the Hidden Heart abridged address some of life's biggest questions, like why God created women. What is God's big picture for marriage? Why is marriage important? How does marriage work? The complementary nature of godly marriage. How can I share God's plan with the next generation? So you can call Karen Bacon to get the copies that you need, or you can actually buy it online at their store. And I just can't recommend it enough. If you want to see radical changes in your home and your marriage, take this Bible study and then email me. Comment on the Facebook page. Let me know. If you take this study and it does nothing for you, I want to know that too. I want to know how that's possible. I want to know what your experience is. It's that good. It's like me knowing about the best lasagna in the world and telling you where to get it, and then you going and getting it and realizing it's the best lasagna in the world and us agreeing on it. That's the only way I can see that actually going on. Like, you're going to love it. So right now I want to pivot over to Ted Cruz saying Pelosi is scared. Now he's doing an interview, and we got this audio clip of him talking about the interaction that we saw between President Trump, Schumer, and Pelosi yesterday, where the president, he totally acquitted himself like a boss. He handled his business with those two. There's a couple things that are really funny about President Trump and I mean funny, ironic, he tends to really be just the same as he has always been. And I say that meaning the public persona we've seen of him, he hasn't changed a bit. He's tried to temper himself a little bit in his speech and you know, his brash off-the-cuff commentary. But for the most part, and I mean like what looks to me like 98, 99%, he's the same. He is the same as he was back when he was actually writing checks to Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi for their campaigns. They've gotten money from Donald Trump. They have been to events with Donald Trump. They've been to Trump Tower. They've been to the Penthouse. They've, you know, been to Mar-a-Lago. These are people who used to think Donald Trump was the bee's knees, the whipped cream on the proverbial cheesecake. He was the cause du jour. He was cool. Now that he's the president and he's the same, they can't seem to deal with it. They're like all worked up and flummoxed. Funny, they didn't want the cameras rolling while they were talking because Donald Trump was making points that they didn't want out in the media. So here's Ted Cruz talking about how he feels Pelosi is scared. It's number 4.
You know, I watched that whole exchange with the president, Chuck Schumer, and Nancy Pelosi, and I think the president was terrific that he was standing up and saying, we're going to keep our promise, we're going to secure the border, we're going to build the wall. And I'll tell you, one of the surest indications of how unhappy the Democrats were in that exchange is over and over again, Nancy Pelosi says, can we turn the TV cameras off? We're not supposed to be doing this publicly. Right. You can tell they're on the losing end of the argument when she's scared that cameras are showing that she and the Democrats are for open borders, and the president is fighting to do what the American people want, which is secure the border, build the wall, and keep our country safe.
So, you know, and obviously Nancy Pelosi coming in as the you know, leader, she'll be the leader in the House, and having that power again, she's very excited about it, and she's very much in the mindset that it belongs to her and that it's something that she's earned. But she's going to be presiding over a conference of Democrats that are the most divided that I think we've seen them. The Democrats historically have been much more unified and much more willing to put down their personal wants and needs for policy or legislation or what have you in favor of the winning of their cause overall as Democrats. But now there's a deep schism in the Democratic side of the aisle where they are literally you know, at each other's throats over who can be the most progressive. And Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and Harry Reid and others who have been leaders, you know, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, et cetera, they've all been instrumental in bringing about this new ideological shift that puts Democrats to the left of themselves, that has younger Democrats crying out and clamoring for more government to the point where they're actually frightening Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and others in leadership. But this is a demon of their own making. And so while it's fun to see them actually have to deal with this and actually come to grips with what they've wrought, it's also difficult because what they've wrought is something that's bad for America. And we want good things for America. We want good leadership. And we're not going to get that when Nancy Pelosi takes the gavel. I think Ted Cruz is right there. We'll have more for you. Children spending 7 hours on smartphones and tablets have less brain function and more. We'll take your calls. 866-963-2037. Be right back.
Are you still stuck on the healthcare roller coaster? Still paying those high premiums? And strapped into huge deductibles? Not knowing what's around the next turn? Well, then let me tell you about a sound, sensible healthcare choice that really is affordable. It's Medishare, the healthcare sharing solution people like you have been trusting in for more than 25 years. Medishare members report saving around $500 a month on their healthcare costs, and they never pay for things they don't believe in. Time to say goodbye to that healthcare roller coaster and say hello to Medishare.
Call ** 345 to find out how much you can save on your health care. Medishare. Call ** 345. Message and data rates may apply. That's ** 345.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
A new documentary reminds us how intrusive social media can be in our lives and how personal privacy is quickly vanishing. Kyle Smith writes about this in a recent op-ed and mentions the documentary The Creepy Line. The name of the documentary is taken from a comment by Google CEO Eric Schmidt. He has a nickname for the invasive nature of his company. He says Google policy on a lot of things is to get right up to the creepy line and not cross it. In the film, Peter Schweitzer illustrates how your search history gives Google an enormous amount of information. Of course, this is supposed to tell Google and other advertisers what you like to buy. But this enormous cache of information also tells anyone who has access to all of it all sorts of things about you and your personal taste. Google also has noticed that you would leave the search engine in order to surf the internet, so it developed the browser Chrome. That means that everything you do online through Chrome is also collected in this cache of information at Google. But that's not enough. Google wants to know what you're doing even when you're not online. So there's Android that uploads a complete picture of what you have been doing when you're not online. Smith concludes it's a surveillance business model. Google Maps, Google Docs, Gmail. Google knows more about you than your spouse does. Over the last few months, Congress has shown some interest in understanding how Google and other big tech firms make their editorial decisions. But Smith also reminds us that the federal government is a heavy user of Google products and has shown little interest in oversight. If Google isn't going to self-police itself, and if Congress isn't going to take any meaningful action, then we as consumers need to be wary of how Google and others use us and our information. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kirby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the program. You can find out more at urbanfamilytalk.com. You can also find Urban Family Talk on Facebook. And also hit the share and subscribe and all those different buttons, the like buttons. Do that to help us grow our presence on Facebook. As interesting as the times are now on Facebook, we're still there. We'll still do our best to be there and to contribute as long as we possibly can. So I found this story about children who spend 7 hours or more. So we have three of these. We have that one. We have the secret recording case where the federal judge ruled in favor of James O'Keefe and Project Veritas on their right to be able to record using these button cams, etc. And then this piece that's over at the Stream. And this piece is about the marriage gap and a few other things, but specifically Republicans being more likely to be happily married than Democrats. And this is a new study that was done that revealed this information. So we'll delve into that first, and then we'll get into this really frightening story about the children and the hours on the internet. So first of all, this is not news. It's not new news that this study has shown that there's a huge marriage gap. This is a American Family Survey sponsored by the Deseret News and the Center for the Study of Elections and Democracy. And it was released earlier this year, and it found that there's a partisan divide in both marriage and family life. Now, you may have noticed this. I certainly have. And anecdotally speaking, obviously, because anything I'm telling you about what I've observed is anecdotal. It's not a study. It's not peer-reviewed research or anything like that. But anecdotally speaking, I noticed that a lot of, I know plenty, I shouldn't say a lot, I know plenty of people who are Democrats who are married. And they have kids. So this isn't saying that Democrats, people who are on the left side of the aisle, don't marry and have children. But what they are finding is that there's a bit of a gap in the number of people who are married and are happily married. And so W. Bradford Wilcox is the director of the National Marriage Project at the University of Virginia. He's a senior fellow at the Institute for Family Studies, and he serves on the advisory board of the American Family Survey. Wilcox was struck by 4 key points while reading a report based on the survey. So he wrote an article about it, and this is super important for us because it gives us a peek into, have you ever just sat up and thought, why are Democrats so obsessed with this particular issue or that particular issue? Why do they constantly look for government to solve this problem as opposed to it being solved in the home? Well, if you have an intact family and you're happily married, then you know that a majority of the problems that you're experiencing can be taken care of by making better decisions in the home. But if you are a single parent, divorced, single period, a person who is a professional but single and living alone, and you've kind of resigned yourself to the fact that you may not get married or you don't want to get married, then you need someone who's going to take on that helpmeet role. And often the person you look to, the entity that you look to, is the government. So there's a marriage gap when it comes to supporting Donald Trump. The gap is almost as large as the gender and education gaps, and it's particularly true for men. Half of married men approve of Trump. Only 40% or less of unmarried men approve of Trump. 35% or more of married women approve of Trump. Only 31% or less of unmarried women approve of Trump. Now, this is largely ignored by the media. Second, Republicans and conservatives really do live the values that they profess. Republicans are 17 percentage points more likely to be married. Conservatives are 9 points less likely to say their relationship is in trouble. And Republicans are 21 percentage points more likely to say being married is essential to living a fulfilling life. Other essentials include having kids, being part of a religious community, community engagement, a rewarding job. In each area, Republicans were more likely to say they were essential than Democrats or independents. So his quote is, "There shouldn't be a partisan divide in institutionalizing lifelong love, but here we are." Now, third, the results conflict with the widespread belief that the marriage gap is mostly a matter of education and income. The survey results suggest something completely different, that the divide is not that simple. It's also about culture and it's about community. And remember, we've talked about this on the show before. If your culture is one that is antithetical to work and participating in the American dream, then it doesn't matter who the president is. You're not going to be successful because your behavioral choices are such that they're preventing you from accessing what is readily available to everyone else in this country who is culturally normative, and that is the opportunity. Opportunities are constantly flowing all around us and coming at us. Opportunities, there can be so many that you can't take advantage of them all. But if culturally you're outside of the norm, you're setting yourself up to be in a position where even if you want to access the opportunities and you maybe even have the brain power and et cetera, but you're culturally not normative, you are not going to be able to participate. You can't access the opportunities. So third, we were talking about the survey suggesting that the divide is not that simple. But the marriage gap and the education gap are equal at 17 percentage points. His research also suggests that religiosity is as good a predictor of where you land on the marriage divide as is education. So when we think about the marriage divide, we need to think about the 3 C's: cash, culture, and community. Then they talk about egalitarianism, where in this case, it means a 50-50 model of marriage. According to his research, having a 50-50 model of marriage is not essential for a happy, fulfilled marriage. Some argue that upper middle class marriages today are more successful than working class or poor couples because they have a 50-50 model in marriage, but Wilcox doesn't agree. Why is it that Republicans and conservatives generally report more marital happiness and stability than do other Americans? Is it because they're more egalitarian? I doubt that. He says it's much more likely that it's because of a higher level of joint marital commitment on the part of Republican spouses. He points out that the 50-50 model of marriage isn't a necessary ingredient for making a good marriage. And I will agree with that, and I'll even go a step further. In the Bible, we're called for the 100-100 concept. That's where a husband is giving a 100% of himself, the wife is giving 100% of herself, and they're in union with God, who always gives more than 100%. That's how you have a successful marriage. And that's why he's as hard as he tries, he can't get away from the fact that high levels of religiosity, his term, not mine, coupled with a high commitment to the actual union and maintaining it, yield better marital results, happier marriages, and marriages that last longer. So he found that Republicans are more likely to be married, to value marriage, and to be in no-drama relationships. The patterns may also in part point to generational, racial, religious, and socioeconomic differences between the parties. But even in light of all of that, he's not making strong claims about causality when it comes to partisanship in marriage. And that this can't be something that we kind of gloat over as, you know, I myself happen to be on the right. I can't gloat over it because millions of Americans who are unhappy in their marriages or are not married at all and don't view marriage as something that is attainable for them, those people are ripe for, you know, being pulled into the idea that the government can fix all of their problems. The government is the de facto spouse of people who are chronically single if they're not doing well financially, because they have to access government programs to make it. A spouse, whether both work or not, you're going to have a higher level of success when men are married. That is also statistically shown to be the truth, that married men earn more money than their single counterparts of similar age and educational background and work experience, because married men have a much stronger drive to succeed because they have a whole group of people that they're caring for through their work efforts, which drives them to work extra hours, work longer hours, and to seek more education and, work accomplishment so that they can earn more money. Not to say that single men aren't driven, but on the whole, when you compare apples to apples, the married men are outperforming the single men because they have so much more to lose. They have so much more on their plates that they have to care for. It is not a good thing for us to have this weird separation between political parties where one political party is full of unhappy single people and people who are, not able to fully access the American dream. And this is because they're obviously there's a gap between the level of religion on the left and the right. One party booed God at their last, convention. One party has stripped all mention of God from their party platform. One party has a persistently negative view of Israel, the nation, and the relationship between Israel and the United States. One party has a demonic and perverse view of human life and especially relishes the destruction of black lives in the womb. One party has a perverted view of mental illness and human sexuality. These things also are coupled with one side of the aisle that is distinctly not as religious or God-fearing as the other side. Now, if you are a person who votes with the Democrats and you are religious and you're happily married, obviously you're within there's part of the study reflects that. Not all Democrats are unhappily married or, anti-religion, but significantly fewer Democrats are marriage-minded, happily married, and religiously, strong, religiously adherent than on the other side of the aisle. So the goal for us, obviously, is to get more Americans, regardless of their political affiliation, to adhere to this more traditional ethos where they're practicing Christianity, practicing their faith, going forward and honoring God with their actions, and having a stronger commitment to the marriages that they enter into. That's something that we have to do. So turning to a little bit of entertainment that's not like a Debbie Downer, because there is so much other news here. I'm going to skip over some of that. And we are going to get to the story about the children spending all the hours on the computer. But I want to talk a little bit about, there's obviously it's Christmas, and at Christmas they usually have some movies come out. And one of the movies that has come out is Aquaman. Now, or I should say it's about to be issued. So right now they have people who have that early access to do the film reviews have had an opportunity to see Aquaman, and they've put out some interesting statements. Now, I'm not doing any spoilers, so don't worry about that. I found over at thewrap.com that they have a film review where James Wan, who I suppose is the director, they call his underwater epic outrageous, and they say that it rewrites the superhero rules. Now, it's Jason Momoa who is the star of the show, It's directed by James Wan, who is also the director of Furious 7. And it ventures from a neon Tron-inspired Atlantis to ancient ruins straight out of Indiana Jones, and then into a nightmare realm of evil swarming fish monsters. There are gigantic battles, crab people, bad guys riding armored sharks, and a Dayglow Rave octopus plays the drums while Aquaman fights for the throne of Atlantis in an underwater gladiator arena called the Ring of Fire. Wow, so every movie has to have Atlantis in it, I guess. Anyway, so the movie is big. It's one of those, kind of blockbuster type films, and it has everything you can think of. Amber Heard wears a dress made out of domesticated jellyfish. Julie Andrews voices a Lovecraftian aquatic leviathan. Nicole Kidman eats a live goldfish. Willem Dafoe spins a trident so fast it creates an impenetrable saltwater shield. So it sounds like the graphics are pretty stunning. Now, you've got Jason Momoa, who plays Aquaman, whose name when he's not Aquaman is Arthur Curry. And he's a beer-swilling underachiever who doesn't ever wear a shirt. And since his mom, Princess Atlanta, who's Kidman, was executed for falling in love with a human and having him, he deems himself unworthy of just about anything. So now he's got to finally accept that he's the one true king of Atlantis and that he's, an actual superhero. Now, all of that being said, I haven't seen any reviews, and I will go to the website that we've had shared with us by many, many of our listeners, where you can get a review of the Christian take on what's going on with this movie. I'm pretty sure we're going to go see it, mainly because the kids have been eagerly anticipating it. So I will be reading the review with interest because I do hope that this movie is good, clean family fun. But it's also an opportunity for us to kind of see what Hollywood is planning on doing with the superhero series that we're kind of in the middle of. Every one of these most recent movies, whether it's Guardians of the Galaxy, the Justice League thing with Batman and all that, Wonder Woman, the Avengers, all of these movies are in the middle of sequels. So it's like there's many more movies to come based on books and comic books, etc., and the whole universe, the Marvel universe and all that. And so I'm hoping this movie is done well and that we're going to be able to see something that's interesting and entertaining and free of social justice garbage. We'll see. I'm not sure, but we'll see. They're saying it's going to be one of the most crowded Christmas box offices in years. And everyone's talking about Julie Andrews having this surprise cameo in Aquaman. And, Julie Andrews, I mean, that's iconic right there. It sounds like it's going to be pretty exciting. All right, so when we get back, we're going to have more for you. Last segment of the show. We'll take some calls, 866-963-2037. Best listening audience in radio, 866-963-2037. Stay there.
This is Just a Minute with Stacey Washington. Whenever a power-hungry activist wants to infringe upon religious liberty, they refer to the separation of church and state, an evil concept created by an activist judge to limit Christian participation in public life. While God does limit the spheres of influence controlled by the church and state, his limitations lead to more liberty. God is head over all and is unsurprised by the goings-on in our society and politics. He has ordained that free men would control their homes, the church, and the state. There is no separation. When godly men rule, the people rejoice. But when evildoers control a nation, citizens groan and wail. There is no substitute for the proper order of our lives and government under God's planning and direction. When Christians pull back, evil flourishes. The Bible mandates Christian influence in government, politics, and public life. It's up to us. I'm Stacey Washington. Find out more at StaceyOnTheRight.com.
Hi, this is Steve Tiber with 8 Days of Hope. We've been all over the country helping disaster victims who lose everything.
It's truly a blessing. I really don't have the words to express.
And yet they see a glimmer of hope when a volunteer shows up.
Building the home, that's the second reason we're here. The number one reason is to share the gospel and give them hope.
It's everything that's right in America. I mean, it really represents the best that we have to offer.
That's one of the main reasons for doing it, is being able to be the hands and feet of Jesus and coming out and working with so many wonderful volunteers.
I just feel like it's important in this day and age to teach a child how to serve.
Please go to our website, 8daysofhope.com, and click on Get Involved. Submit your email address, and the next time we go anywhere with a disaster, we'll invite you to come along as well.
I love coming in the job room because you can see these pieces of paper. They aren't just a piece of paper. Right. It's a family that's hurting, and it's a gospel opportunity.
You know, I just thank God, for this moment. I mean, I'll be back in my home, and I know it's going to be awesome.
Come love others with 8 Days of Hope.
I'm Hank Weinblum with your word of the week. Hail and farewell. Yet leaving something behind. Much of the past week was devoted to tributes to the 41st President, George H.W. Bush.
Celebrate the president's legacy.
Legacy can mean a couple of things. If you inherit money, that's a legacy. Bush 41 was a wealthy man, but that's not the legacy people are talking about.
He left a simple yet profound legacy to his children, to his grandchildren, and to this country.
And that legacy is?
Service.
A legacy can be the way you lived your life, the things you accomplished, the example you set for those who follow you.
I just love the legacy he left. I love that.
Legacy comes from Middle English and Old French, having to do with the functions of an official of the church or government. And so the legacy of legacy is a way to acknowledge a life well lived.
To honor the legacy of President Bush and to show that we are his legacy.
With your word of the week, Hank Weinblum, Fox News.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Well, Republicans think the president's doing exactly what he said, and that's what we should be focused on. I think when the president said to Senator Schumer, I'll gladly take that mantle, I think what he was saying is I'll gladly and proudly take the mantle of doing what we told the voters we were going to do, which is build a border security wall. So, yeah, the Freedom Caucus in particular, we took a position last night, Tucker. We're going to support the president, the full $5 billion for the border security wall, and let's reform our asylum laws while we're at it, because that will address the problem. I think it's part our leadership not pushing hard enough, and Paul not pushing hard enough, and I think it also is Democrats are for open borders. Democrats want to abolish ICE. Their party's champion in the last election, Secretary Clinton, what did she run on? A borderless hemisphere. So I think it's all part of that. But the president today, I think, made it pretty darn clear he's going to stand firm and focus on doing what we were elected to do. And I always say we make this job too complicated. That's a pretty basic thing to focus on. Don't get too complicated. Just do what you were elected to do. And we were certainly elected to build a border security wall.
What more can we say? That's Representative Jordan coming out strong, guns blazing about the border wall. And what else can we say? The guy is right. He's right. That's what they were elected to do. Don't forget it. Don't forget that we haven't forgotten it. Constituents want border security. And it's not just a Republican issue. There are plenty of people who aren't Republicans who see what's going on at the border, and they are not only appalled by it, but they're absolutely horrified that we would see this type of crazy pants behavior going on and not do anything about it. So let's not get it twisted. We need the border secure. The president has the ability to do it. We should make that happen. So now I want to get over to this story about the kids, and these are kind of stories that it's a little disheartening, because the first thing that we have to understand is if they say children who spend 7 hours or more on smartphones and tablets a day are showing signs that their brain cortex is thinning prematurely, that means there are kids who are spending that much time on it. Now, Apple has this new thing that they do. If you download the latest update, they have something called screen time, and you can go in and you can look and see how much time you're spending on your device. What we often find, I know talking with our kids' school where they have this one-to-one iPad thing, they have a lot of features that you have to kind of opt into to take advantage of, blocking of websites, screen time monitoring, et cetera, et cetera. And if you go with that, then you have a lot more information. But it takes time to get it done. It takes time to make it, to fix up the websites that your kid can't get to, et cetera, et cetera. And I actually have a small list of items that we need to do with one of our kids' devices to make sure that, she's being protected from unwanted content and also to manage her screen time. But this is information that we as parents, we just don't have any excuse for not paying attention and not governing ourselves accordingly. And so here's what the findings are. The findings show that children are at risk of deteriorating memory function, perception skills, and cognitive abilities. And this is a new major U.S. study. They spent $300 million of research funds, and it shows results of the effect of technology on kids. First, they went through the process of scanning the brains of 4,500 children. The scientists are in the process of following more than 11,000 9 to 10-year-olds over the course of a decade to see what the screen time does to their kids. Now, we already have a precursor to this. We know that there's concern about what happens to kids' brains because none of the people who created the iPhone have their kids in one-to-one programs. Their children aren't allowed to have iPhones. They made this product for us, but they don't have their own children using it. That's our first warning sign. So the researchers also determined that children who spend more than 2 hours a day of screen time scored lower on thinking and language tests. 2 hours a day impacts test scores. The brain cortex is the outermost layer of neural tissue that processes information from the physical world. It is critical for cognitive functions such as perception, language, memory, and consciousness, but thins as we mature into old age. The difference was significant from participants who spent less time using smart devices. Dr. Gaia Dowling, an NIH doctor working on the project, cautioned against drawing a conclusion because they aren't completely sure it's being caused by the increased use of modern technology. They're not sure if they're not absolutely sure if it's the screen time. They don't know if it's a bad thing, but what they can say is that what the brains look like of kids who spend a lot of time on screens, and it's not just one pattern. The scientists won't be able to draw a definitive outcome until they follow them over the course of several years. A 2014 study showed that there's a direct correlation between the thickness of the brain cortex and the IQ score. The cortex begins to thin after the age of 5 or 6 as a part of the normal aging process, and people with a significant increase in IQ do not have the expected cortical thinning, and if people who have a significant decrease in IQ have exaggerated cortical thinning. So they have a major release of the initial data that's scheduled for early 2019, and I think that's going to be when the rubber meets the road because you'll be able to look at the data. You'll be able to kind of correlate a lot of what they're saying in their summary with what they found in the actual data sets and kind of be able to dig in. So we'll open up the phone lines right now for some calls. We have 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037. So then you've got the secret recording case from Project Veritas. A federal judge has actually ruled in favor of James O'Keefe in this recording case. What's so interesting about this is that he's over and over again been smeared as some kind of provocateur and con artist. And I've heard him speak in person, and I have his book. And first of all, the book is very well done. And second of all, he's no con artist. He's someone who is really willing to chase after stories. He's a classical journalist in the sense that this guy just does a great job. And because of that, he's been punished. So you've got U.S. District Chief Judge Patty B. Saris, and she says the right to record public officials secretly is protected by the First Amendment with reasonable caveats. She rejects the state's notion that public officials need space to work efficiently. Project Veritas has made First Amendment history, says James O'Keefe, with the summary judgment in this case being entered into our favor. PVA versus Conley becomes the first case in United States history to hold that secretly recording government officials is protected by the First Amendment. Judge Saris, a Clinton appointee to the federal bench, ruled that Massachusetts state law may not constitutionally prohibit the secret audio recording of government officials, including law enforcement officials performing their duties in public spaces, subject to reasonable time, manner, and place restrictions. This is not to say that police and government officials have no privacy interests. However, the diminished privacy interests of government officials performing their duties in public must be balanced by the First Amendment interests of news gathering and information dissemination. The ruling was in favor of two separate sets of plaintiffs, one of which live streamed footage of officers while they were performing their jobs, and the other, James O'Keefe, who was actually caught, or, he was using his cameras to catch politicians going against their constituents and engaging in illegal behavior. So Massachusetts law, enacted in 1968, placed a general ban on taping wire and oral communications. The legislature said it was concerned with the rapid increase in use of modern electronic surveillance devices and those being a danger to citizens' privacy. But in October, Project Veritas exposed a staffer of the Andrew Gillum gubernatorial campaign as saying that Florida is an expletive state. In the same month, O'Keefe and Project Veritas revealed footage of Heidi Heitkamp and her staff exposing her as being far left despite her efforts to appeal to voters as being more moderate. So it's a win. And I particularly think it's a win because what we found is cameras, you get people's true behavior. And it's not about catching this group or that group or saying these people are bad or, no, it's not. What it is about is being utterly cognizant of the fact that human beings are going to fail and they're going to make mistakes, and having your word against their word has not been enough in the past to exonerate people who are innocent. And so it's good to have a ruling from someone who, this woman is hardly a conservative. She's saying that it is in the public interest to have people operating in the public being able to be recorded or filmed reasonably. So we'll see how far that goes. We'll see if there's even more that will come out of it. I don't know. I can't say whether or not they're going to appeal. Who knows? But we'll see. We'll see what happens with it. So, in addition, we also see there's some more speculation on this story with Kevin Hart, and moving on from Kevin Hart, because remember that there was some discussion about Ellen DeGeneres possibly doing the Oscars. She's actually got some news bubbling about her over here at CNN, this is kind of fascinating. She says she's considering ending her run on daytime talk. She's mulling what to do when her contract comes to an end in 2020. Now, this is often, these stars will do this. They'll start talking about ending their show, and what they're really doing is they're negotiating for a better contract. She told the New York Times in a new interview, she's, what am I going to do? She renewed her deal in 2016, but she says she was close to declining the offer that would have kept her there past season 17. She says she's reportedly torn between advice given to her from two significant people in her life. Wow. She's won 57 daytime Emmys since its debut in 2003. I think, I would obviously be happier if she ended the show, but who knows what she's actually going to do. I tend to not believe these stories where they're like, oh, she's not going to do the show. Oprah Winfrey did that for like 7 years. Every year, every time there was up for renewal, she was like, well, I think I can only do the show until, this year. And then that year would come and go, and then she'd say she can only do it for another couple of years. And then she finally ended it, and then immediately started another show, just like the one she had before, on her own network. So she's still doing shows. Same old. And there's the big deal with Theresa May. And I've actually been feeling kind of sorry for her, because she's clearly not conservative enough. It's as if she tries to, be moderate enough to win over the people on the opposing side, not understanding that they'll never be on her side. And so she oversaw this fantastic Brexit vote, but now they're not able to get a deal done because it seems as if she's literally just, she's mired down in indecision. And so the people on her side are, she's got to, we got to keep her. We have to keep her there. And people who are against her, like, they got their daggers out. Let's get rid of her. And then, you look around at what liberalism is doing to France and what Macron is going through with his leadership. He's begging to be left in power, begging for the people to stop rioting and et cetera, et cetera. And you can tell that's not the direction you want to go in. It seems like Theresa May would double down on her strength as a conservative and just go with it. That she would have gotten some strength from spending time with Donald Trump. I know he's brash and people say, that they find that off-putting, but he's also a winner. He won his election and liberals don't like him, but he has over 88% approval rating with the people in his own constituency base, his voters. He can turn out 20,000 people to just anywhere he plans on being for a rally. He can get 20,000 people there, even in small towns like Columbia. So last story of the day. And this one, I can't believe how horrible it is. You got this middle school kid and his last name is Trump and he's been bullied for years. And so after being tormented daily at Delaware's Tolley Middle School, his parents changed his last name from Trump. Her last name is Trump, both parents. He says he hates himself, he hates his last name, and he feels sad all the time. He doesn't want to live feeling like that anymore. They said when the 45th president announced his candidacy, the little boy was in elementary school and he was being bullied relentlessly, but they thought, well, when he gets to middle school, it will stop. Well, he was being ridiculed and bullied for the fact his last name was Trump. They pulled him out of school and homeschooled him for a year, then put him in a new school. Same old, same old. They curse at him. They call him an idiot. They call him stupid. And the teachers try not to say his name in class. So they've changed his last name to his father's last name, which is Berto. Unbelievable. All right. That's the show for today. Good evening from the Heartland. God bless you. Be back with you tomorrow.